I I have an email from a member of our audience about the situation in Burley. We'll get to that later. I'm not even sure I want to read it on the air, but it is certainly funny. Um, and I know that they say in radio you shouldn't leave people out in the cold with inside jokes. So we'll try our best to get to that at some point. 9:07. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 59. Looking for a high temperature. I've mentioned this already on Saturday, 88. And you may be wondering, haven't you ever seen hot weather before, Bill? Not on my birthday, this Saturday. There's an old line. You get to a certain age, and you really aren't sure you even want to have birthdays any longer. Richard Nixon, when he turned 80, was being interviewed by a reporter, and the reporter said, "How does it feel?" And Nixon, who was not in the best of health at that stage, looked back at the reporter and said, "Well, I don't much care for it, but when I consider the alternative, there you go." So I'll take the birthday versus the alternative at this stage of my life. Watching television yesterday, some of you may have heard about a focus group that was done. They sat down a group of Democrats from New Hampshire, where they have that first-in-the-nation presidential primary. That'll be coming up now. Hard to believe this. That'll be coming up. Here we are in October, so November, December, in 3 months, at the tail end of 3 months. Maybe it's early February, but the primary season will be getting underway. You'll have the Iowa caucus, and then it'll be followed by this early primary in New Hampshire, then South Carolina, and then there's a big flurry of primaries coming up in March. There's 2 sets of flurries of primaries taking place in March, and so the contest to elect the next president of the United States will be down to just a couple of major party candidates in a matter of a few months, and all of it within 6 months from where we are right now. Hard to believe, as I say. Seems like we just went through all of this with Romney and Barack Obama just a few years ago. MSDNC did a focus group with a group of people, Democrats from New Hampshire, and they were talking about Hillary Rodham Clinton, who, as the media likes to say, is the front runner for the Democrat Party. Although by a slim margin at this moment, by a slim margin. Listen to what some of these people had to say. These are Democrats sitting in a focus group.
I think my opinion is it's a little more general, just in that she speaks articulately about her positions without having that edge and that scorned kind of woman thing. That's a little off-putting.
Just talk a little bit more about that.
I think that can put off a lot of male voters.
Oh, tell me what it's like. What are you seeing that you're seeing?
You know, when she's, I don't want to use the word, but
you can.
It's that, like, women need to be equal. I mean,
Right.
I don't feel unequal.
I agree. I don't feel unequal. I don't feel that I've had a job where I feel unequal to my male counterparts. So it's not an issue that speaks to me.
It's a double standard. If it was a guy up there saying that, he would be impassioned.
Do you agree with Shannon that some people might see that?
Oh, yeah.
I like Hillary. I think she's a strong candidate, but she has that.
I don't think you have to have that.
Yeah, and she has that condescending, and I can see that causing gridlock.
Condescending. But that's not the worst. The one woman said earlier, I don't know if I should say it, and then she kind of whispered something. If you didn't quite catch what she said bitch. Yes, that's what she said Hillary Clinton came across as. These are Democrats. These are people who you would expect to say, aha, the queen is marching to victory. We will get behind her. Instead, they're calling her a condescending bitch. I'm not, and I'm just repeating it. I'm sorry if you don't like that. I'm just repeating what they said. But that wasn't all. That wasn't all. This is coming from the Daily Caller today. MSNBC's Morning Joe cut portions of an on-camera focus group that is considered too negative for candidate Clinton, according to co-host Joe Scarborough. So again, she was called a bitch and she was called condescending by Democrats in this focus group, and that wasn't the worst of it. So the network made a decision not to air that because it just got progressively worse as time went on with this focus group, and being MSDNC, they're in the tank for any Democrat. They didn't want to air that to give the impression that Hillary Clinton is a sinking ship. Maybe a battleship, I guess, still at this point, but still battle axe. But she's a sinking ship at this stage of the game. Meanwhile, there is a piece today in Washington Examiner from Michael Barone. Michael Barone, one of my favorite writers in Washington, used to spend a lot more time as a talking head on television. He's really just focusing now primarily on writing for the Examiner and a couple of other publications. But he says her leftward tack on immigration and guns has risks for November. And what she has done is she has watched Bernie Sanders over her shoulders, and he is closing in on a great many of these issues. Now, Sanders calls himself, he's not making it up, he calls himself a socialist. He's not shy about that. So Hillary Clinton now is trying to out-socialist the socialist. On immigration, for example, she promises to go at least one step further than President Obama. She endorses his orders effectively legalizing not only dreamers, those are the children, the anchor babies, if you will, persons brought into the country illegally as children and who meet certain conditions, not even an anchor baby in some cases, obviously, but their parents as well. That latter order has been put on hold by a federal judge, but that doesn't faze Clinton. Quote, I will not be deporting parents. I will not be breaking up families, unquote, she told a Telemundo interviewer earlier this month. Now, you just heard that this has already been held up by a court. The court is already blocking part of Mr. Obama's plans to recruit all of these people as new voters for his party. Hillary Clinton is saying, I won't let that stop me. So she's saying that I'm more important than the courts, even though the courts, Congress, and the presidency are all co-equal branches of the federal government. Understand what she's saying is, like Barack Obama, I will rule by fiat, that is, by divine right. I will just simply say, let it be done, and it therefore will be done. The writer also goes on to say Clinton is willing to use administrative methods to restrict gun ownership. In New Hampshire this month, she promised executive action of an unspecified nature to restrict gun sales. She also called for repeal of the 2005 law granting legal immunity from lawsuits for gun manufacturers and dealers. In other words, well, you made the firearm that was used in that shooting in Oregon last week. Therefore, you're responsible. You put that gun into that man's hands. So the victims, their families are now going to come and get all of your assets. That's what she's saying. And if you use that model, how about then a court, when it sets a precedent, if a court ruled in favor and said you could bankrupt the gun manufacturers, then if someone gets in a car accident, I guess we could all then go sue the automobile manufacturers and then put them out of business. If you choke out a piece of spaghetti, and let's say it kills you, then perhaps, your family could go sue all of the spaghetti manufacturers. Because by making that spaghetti, they should have been aware that you could choke to death on it, and therefore, they are culpable in your death. 9:15, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. And liberals say they are not trying to hijack the Constitution and our constitutional protections. They claim that they are in no way attempting to rewrite that document. They claim that they are not trying to install a system that we might recognize as Big Brother. What else would you call all of this? They will stop at nothing to have greater control over your life, and that will mean the loss of liberties. Maybe not all at once, but we've already seen them eroded over the last half dozen years. This will then continue. You can reach our program this morning, 736-0300, or drop me an email, Bill Colley, that's bill.colley with a period in the middle of the two names, bill.colley at townsquaremedia.com. It's 9:16:59, and you're listening to News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. I should also point out, I'm going to share with you a little later in the program. We have a guest coming up in just a few minutes who will talk to us about Meals on Wheels. But following her appearance on the air, I want to share with you something that I came across while I was doing some reading last night, and it's called 7 Myths About Guns. And frankly, if you don't hear anything else today, you got to hear this coming up. So I'll try to get to that in the last half hour of the show. It came from a publication called The Federalist, and as I was reading through it yesterday, I was just thinking to myself, The Federalist has an audience of perhaps, at best, there might be 100,000 people who saw this. Probably not anywhere near that across the country who saw it. out of 330 million some Americans. That's all. You will not hear this reported on MSDNC or CNN, maybe not even on Fox. You will not see it in the pages of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, or the Times News. These are the myths that he's talking about, and people who are out there trying to take your guns away. And yes, there are people out there who are attempting that. If you didn't hear it the other day when Mr. Obama was making his remarks about the shooting over in Oregon, he made a comment that we probably should be following what happened in Australia in 1997. What did they do in Australia back then, 18 years ago? Gun confiscation. Not control. Gun confiscation. He's the one who raised that point last week in his remarks. This is why you have to be very afraid if you own firearms or you're concerned about your liberties that are guaranteed by God and enumerated in the Constitution that the United States founding fathers of the United States government put together. And so we'll share that coming down the road in a short while. Jeanette Rotho is going to be joining us in a few minutes from the Twin Falls Senior Center and sharing with us some concerns and some needs they have because of greater demand, just skyrocketing demand that we're seeing in the need of Meals on Wheels. You know, we've been talking a lot about where the economy is going over the last few weeks on this program, maybe for the last several months on this program. But if you're looking for little canaries in coal mines, leading indicators of what's happening out there, greater need of this program probably tells us that a lot of people out there right now, they're just getting by, or maybe they're not getting by any longer. And as I mentioned earlier in the program, we'll get to this too as well. There is a former Treasury Secretary from the Clinton administration warning today that we better be darn sure we pay attention to what's going on with this. Maybe there's nothing we can do, but just burying our heads in the sand won't help. And he's warning of a global economic calamity. This isn't Alex Jones talking. This is a fellow by the name of Lawrence Summers. And if you've got someone from that Clinton era who's bringing this up, then I think we should stand up and take notice. Because the warning signs are coming from a lot of different directions, but when old liberal farmhands actually start coming along and saying the same thing, by golly, it might be time to make sure that you have your ammunition stored and that you have your firearms in a safe place and that you perhaps have a pantry filled with some goods to feed your family for a while. 20 minutes after 9 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 60.